This afternoon should be an opportunity. What we'd like to do really is share with you a new way that we're looking at learning in school. And if you were watching the slides as you were coming in today, you'll realise that things are changing exponentially. So we've really got to keep up with the pace of things that are happening out there in the world. And we're preparing children for employment in a future that's very, very different from the one that we grew up in. So we've really got to make sure that we are preparing them for life. So we're looking in school at ways of doing that. So we're going to share how we're approaching it with you this afternoon. And I'm going to take you on a bit of a personal journey, because through 26 years of being in teaching, I think I've finally got to the place where I really now understand what I believe is right for children and the right approach. And I know the things that we've been doing at St Herbert's over the last sort of 6-12 months working in that direction have been really exciting and have inspired the staff and have engaged the children and really seem to be having a positive impact. Ofsted certainly endorsed what they saw when they were in a couple of weeks ago. So we're quite excited about it. We're going to look at powerful learning. And as you'll see from these photographs here, they're all photographs of children outdoors. And you'll know that that's a great passion of mine by now, I think. One of the reasons for that is because it's very easy to see children really excited, really engaged, and communicating and talking about their learning when they're outside. It happens really naturally without anything clever, particularly. So outside, children do seem to be excited and all focused, working together in teams with a common goal, and really positive things come out of that. So that's where I wanted to start, really, with my passion for outdoors. And looking at one or two of these pictures, you'll see as children work in the outdoors, not necessarily talking about learning your next times table or learning the next 20 years words to spell, although they are important things. They're learning life skills here. They're learning to communicate with each other. They're learning to support and to help each other. They want to succeed. They want to do it. It's a bit scary, but they want to get there. They want to make sure that everybody is supported. You can see the enjoyment, which is what I was talking about earlier. They're questioning, they're planning, they're thinking. They're going through their strategies, working out how they're going to get there and how they're going to succeed. And you can see on their faces that clearly that sense of success is very, very powerful. And there we are at the top of Dent just a few weeks ago. Sorry, High Pike a few weeks ago. So, the things that they are actually learning are planning, revising what they're doing, trying to make it better. They're asking questions. They're making links. Well, I tried this earlier and that didn't work, so let's try something different. Or maybe that will work in this situation. Or I know this was a good idea when I did such and such, so let's try that. They're imagining what it would be like if, or how can I get to this place, or what is that particular situation going to bring for me. They're reasoning, explaining why they're doing what they're doing, constantly revising their thinking. Sorry, I've put that down twice, I do apologise. Developing this thing called interdependence, which I think confused quite a lot of us when we first came up with it, because I think historically we've all talked about becoming independent learners. But if you think about whenever you have created your best bit of work, or whenever you've done something that's really exciting and moved you forward, chances are you weren't on your own. There would be somebody else there with you, either collaborating in a team, or there would be somebody there as a sort of guide or a mentor to help you through so that you can work. So we don't often work totally independently. So we work depending on the people around us. So that's this interdependence, knowing when it's appropriate to shout for others' help, when it's appropriate to be by yourself, when it's appropriate to work as a team. Collaboration, not just cooperating together, but actually using 2 brains or more brains to get the job done. Empathy and listening. Obviously, it's important to listen to other people, and children will talk now, if you get a chance to talk to some of them this afternoon, about how they really value other people's opinions and how other children can help move them on with their learning. And distilling the right information, carefully working out which are the important bits of information that they need at that time. And if you think back to those photos of the outdoors, it just happens outdoors. That's what's going on. You see it really clearly. It's absolutely, clearly obvious. So that kind of learning happens naturally outdoors, but our challenge was to make sure that it happened inside the classroom with every lesson, so that in literacy and maths and other lessons, children support each other, children work together, they share their brains, they share their ideas, they make sure that everybody's there. If there's somebody struggling with times tables or a maths calculation or spellings or writing or coming up with ideas, instead of going, you're not copying mine, getting them to share ideas so they can all move on together, and it's really very powerful in a classroom. So that's what we wanted to do. And that's when we discovered something called BLP, or Building Learning Power, which is a framework breaking down those behaviours, because it happens more automatically outdoors. And then we get into the classroom and we think, how do we get them to collaborate better? How do we get them to support each other better? How do we get them to revise their work? If they're trying to put up a tent and they get it wrong, they'll go back and they'll do it, and they'll persevere and persevere until they actually get that tent up, because that's what they want to do. If they're trying to write a story and it's okay, children traditionally will often say, well, that's good enough, that's fine, I'm moving on. I don't really want to go over it and redraft it and revise it and get it better and get it better. So we really wanted to make it happen inside the classroom and to make learning exciting. So that's what we've been looking at, is how to get those learning behaviours working well in the classroom. So we needed to know, what are the next steps for teachers? How do we get them to do that? What is the sticking point? They've got to this place. How do we move them on to become better learners? And through BLP, which I think you're going to hear about from Amajit and Leanne in a second, and also seeing it this afternoon, I hope you'll see that it's beginning to spread through the school now and becoming more obvious. Instead of children sitting at desks, yes, in a group of 6, but probably working independently, we've got children working together at tables. So they're actually helping each other with their work, planning, empathising, listening to each other. And here's this interdependence. Together they will solve that problem and all get a real sense of success out of it, whereas possibly on their own or individually, some might and some might not. This is right down in foundation stage. Children asking questions, children making links. If I do this, the sand ends up on my feet, so I won't do that, I'll put it somewhere else, and this will work or this will be successful. Or I can use this container for that, or I can use this tool for whatever. Talking with each other, collaborating, sharing their ideas. Similarly here, some of our older juniors. Distilling, which bit of information do I need to crack the code? Which is the important fact? Where are the red herrings, if you like? Asking each other questions. Reasoning. Explaining their answers. Well, if it's this, then it must be that, and therefore this is the way we need to solve it. So breaking down the steps in their learning. Collaboration, obviously that kind of a project, and you can see the enjoyment on their faces, isn't going to happen unless they are collaborating. And the amount of talk for the learning that went on in this activity was incredible. I think it's a recognised fact that children talk and use 6 times the vocabulary outdoors than in a classroom situation. And what we're trying to do is bring that vocabulary and talk into our classrooms. So we don't want children sitting silently in rows, panicking or not able to move on in their learning. We want them with each other, working together and moving everybody on so that everybody's supported and everybody's driving together and succeeding. And you can see from those children's faces, they obviously succeeded with that project there. And that wouldn't have been something they would have managed independently or on their own. So we are beginning to see it now translating into the classrooms, and I hope you're beginning to get a flavour of what this is about now. It's about those learning behaviours and how we break them down and ensure that the children become lifelong learners. So that's what we're going to invite you to come and have a look at in Key Stage 2 in a moment. But before we do that, Leanne's going to take over and explain a little bit more about the nitty-gritty. Leanne, as you know, is our Chair of Governors, but she also is a consultant in Building Learning Power, which was brilliant when our 2 brains clicked together about 12, 18 months ago, and we realised the possibilities that this could bring our school. So we're working quite closely with Leanne as a consultant on this one, and you're going to fill us in a little bit more about what it looks like.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okie doke. I'm going to start by talking to you about these 2 people here. Now, the one on the left, most of you will recognise, as he is my Zach. Okay, and that photograph was taken on his first day at nursery last year. Okay? On the right-hand side is a granddaughter of a friend of mine. Okay? What I'm trying to show you over the next few slides is that all of the learning behaviours that Sheila's been talking to you about are completely natural, and that we all have them from the day that we're born. And that you see them in every classroom, in every school in England or anywhere around the world. Okay? Because they're naturally within us. In schools that actively build learning power, the children know it. Okay? So it's making it really obvious to the children by being really explicit about how they're learning in everything that they do, and actively coaching them to get better at that. Okay? So we're just going to have a little look at these two little ones here. So at the top there, you've got Evie playing in the sand, and then Zach at the bottom in the water tray there, constantly asking themselves questions. What happens if I push this down? Will it fill up? How can I make sure I get as much water down this drain pipe as I possibly can? All of those sorts of questions they're asking themselves all the time, but they don't necessarily know it. So one of the things that we ask teachers to do is to think about how you can encourage them to recognise their inner voice, and how you can encourage them to use that more and more. So they're naturally got this notion of curiosity. Here we're starting to think about absorption, so being completely engrossed in what they're doing. So these two little ones there, naturally doing it as part of what they want to do. They've decided what they want to be learning at that point, and they are completely absorbed because that's the way they want to be learning. And so making it clear to them that that's how they're learning, as they investigate things like, there's not enough paint on this brush, how can I mix this colour, how can I make sure I cover this post completely in paint even though it's water, so that they know that they are completely absorbed in what they're doing. Sheila talked a little bit earlier about collaborative behaviours, and when children first come into school in nursery, a lot of them aren't used to being able to actively learn with somebody else. But it's something that we ask them to do the minute they walk through the door, because they have to be able to tolerate learning alongside somebody else and tolerate sharing resources. So it's something that we encourage them to get better at. And you can see at the bottom here these three nursery children last year starting to imitate, so copying ideas. Children quite often think that it's not a good idea to copy things, and it's not about copying the answer, but copying the process so that they can learn and improve and get better at things themselves. Okay, Evie here is starting to use her imagination by taking on the role of the witch. Not really sure whether she likes witches or not, and you'll see children before they even come to school and as they go through school pretending to be characters from books, pretending to be characters from films, using their imagination in that way, but getting them to understand that that's how they're learning. Right, perseverance Sheila talked about as well, and in those outdoor learning pictures we saw examples of children sticking at it. But perseverance is a lot more than just trying and trying again, because you can keep on going in the same way, but unless you've got different ways to try, you may never be successful. And it's something that I think more and more, as quite a lot of things with children, it's an immediate response or an immediate success. If you think of all the video games and things that they play, and when they're using computers at home, everything's immediate. And they're not necessarily developing this keep trying, keep at it and stick with it that so many of us were encouraged to do when we were younger. So on the right hand side there you can see what Mrs. Danby calls Zach's concentration face, because he's really absorbed in what he's doing, and he spent ages rolling that dough out until it was flat enough to make the most biscuits possible. Okay, so he was persevering in that particular instance. Okay, so all of the children, I've just picked out two there, but all of those learning behaviours are natural in all of us. Okay, and what Building Learning Power does is asks teachers to help children get better, to first of all recognise that that's how they're learning, and then by using these approaches and making sure that the learning behaviours that they're using are used to go through the Greeks or the pirates or whatever their learning focus is, so that children are aware that that's how they're learning, and they can transfer that when they're outside of school at football club, when they go and get a job when they're older. So if they are going to have 15 jobs when they're older, they've got the skills, and they know they've got the skills to change and apply to whatever situation that they've got. Because unfortunately, What the research shows us at the moment is that by the time the children get to Key Stage 4, they are so dependent on their teachers, it's unbelievable. And part of that is the culture that we're in for exam culture, etc. And there are lots of secondary schools, Keswick School being one of them, that are doing a lot to support children in using these learning behaviours. So that's what, if we can get it right from primary age, it'd be even better by the time they get to Key Stage 4. So that's part of the reason. So, okay, the way that these learning behaviours have been organised, Professor Guy Claxton is the brains behind this, okay? He has done extensive research throughout the world, and he has provided us with this framework. Now, if you look, sorry, just to your right over here, you can see, and you'll see these, what we call icons or pictures, that represent all of the learning behaviours throughout Key Stage 2 when you go in the classrooms this afternoon, okay? These are the things that we're talking about, and there are 17 different learning behaviours that we have naturally within us. The 4 that you've got up here are what we call about developing resilience, okay? So it's about children becoming absorbed, which you saw earlier on. Managing distractions, so they know if they are distracted by something, or if they are the distraction, that they need to do something about it. Okay, and it's about having the strategies to bring yourself back to the task or challenge that's in front of them. So it's encouraging children to recognise that. Noticing attentively, you'll have a look in one of the classes this afternoon at some children doing some noticing. And it's about looking beyond the obvious, looking for small details that give you more information and increase your understanding of a picture or a story or something outside in the natural world. Okay? Perseverance we've talked about before. Okay, the next one. This is called resourcefulness, and there are 5 learning behaviours which make up resourcefulness. So asking questions and taking a questioning approach. So at home, what you might do is if your child asks you a question about something, answer it with a question and get them to do the thinking rather than giving them the response. Making links between one thing and another and using that learning to help them in a new situation. Reasoning and capitalising. Capitalising is about using the best resource to help them in a particular situation. Okay, when we're thinking about developing social relationships, we're thinking about what we call reciprocity, and that's a word that the children love to learn to say. And it's not just about the words. These words are the labels, if you like, for the behaviours, and it's a way of getting the children to talk about how they're learning. And one of the things you'll see in the classroom in a moment is collaboration, which is about team working, and it's about, that could be either with a pair or a 3 or a larger group. And it's investigating how a team works effectively. So outside of school with your children, you might have them playing for a football team or going to a dance class. Anything, any clubs or cubs or brownies, they will have opportunities to collaborate. When you're at home, you might be wanting them to help you tidy their room. Okay, so all of those things, and thinking about more than one pair of hands is going to make it easier, and how can we do this in the best way so that we get it done quickly. All of those sorts of things that we can encourage children to do. And then finally, we have reflectiveness. Okay, and I'm just going to pick here on revising. Now, this isn't revising in the sense of revising for an exam. It's about thinking back on things and seeing whether you could change the way you've done something if you were to do it again. And one of the biggest things behind all of this is that understanding of being stuck. Because until we're stuck, we're not really learning, we're coasting. So when children get stuck, they have to persevere, but they have to learn in one of these ways to get themselves unstuck. So encouraging them to find a way out of a problem, and it could be tying a shoelace, it could be anything simple that you would be going through with them at home, and talking to them about, well, how did you do it last time, what could you do differently? That's about revising, and you'll see some of that going on in the classroom this afternoon. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the others now because we'll have opportunity to do that again, I'm sure. But I'll hand over to Amajit now to take from there.
Right, I'm just going to give you a bit of an outline how all of this is working in Key Stage 2 classrooms at the moment, and again you'll have an opportunity to have a look in detail. And I think it's useful for you to know as parents that each class has got a focus of 4 of these behaviours each half term. So if you want to go into your child's classroom and see what those 4 behaviours are for that half term that the teacher is focusing on, you can again back all that up at home. That'd be really useful. You'll probably find them either by the board in the classrooms, or if you just ask the class teacher, it'd just be good for you to have that awareness of what we're doing. And in years 3 and 4, we're talking about these behaviours being our learning muscles, and we talk about stretching and exercising our learning muscles. So for instance, in my classroom this afternoon, you'll see the children stretching and exercising their noticing learning muscle. At the other end of the school, the older children just refer to them as learning behaviours. Which learning behaviours are we going to try and work on in these lessons? That's how the teachers will talk about those behaviours with the older children. So the lessons actually have a dual focus. So we have our normal content. So for instance, I might be teaching division to my maths group, but I'll also have in the back of my mind that I would like these children to exercise their noticing skills. So I might introduce that, for instance, where the children have got maybe 5 divisions up on the board, and I've written all the answers up with them, and some of them are wrong. So can they notice and work out? And it's just this whole idea of getting children just to really hone in on the fine details. These are not all of the behaviours, as what's been said, all the icons and all the 17 of them that are there, but we're just focusing on 4 every half term. We're hoping by the end of this summer we would have hit every single one in all the 4 classrooms. And the teachers have been really encouraged, and it's been important for you to know this as well, that as adults we've got to be very, very open in ourselves as being learners as well, that learning doesn't stop when you finish school, that learning is a lifelong thing. And quite often we will talk to the children now about the learning that we are doing, like for instance, and where these behaviours come into play. I've been talking to my class about some flat pack furniture that arrived through the post without any instructions, and they're quite good now at working out which learning behaviours I had to really sort of put into action to get some success out of that. And they will say, oh, you had to be absorbed. And I said, yes, I was absorbed for 3 hours trying to put this flat furniture together without any instructions. I had to keep revising and going back. But they are very good. If you speak to your children, I mean, I know that there are parents here of children in my class who have said, I've been managing my distractions at home. I have been finding a quiet place to do my homework, even though little brother or sister has been crawling all over me. So they're quite used to using the language of BLP now, and you've probably heard them, but just to give you an idea of where it's all coming from. As teachers, we're also, and I think it's important for you to know this, is that we're stepping back from giving any quick fixes. So if a child has got a problem or they're having a difficulty, and as Leanne has said, we don't launch in with the right answer for them. It's all done through questioning, saying, right, what do you already know? How can you use this? We get them to break things down. I think that's really, really important. That's a lifelong skill. And as Leanne showed you the graph, we're just trying to move away from this idea of children being very, very dependent on adults all the time, because there's going to come a time where they've got to really be thinking for themselves, and that's the sort of thing that we're encouraging at the moment. So if you can try some of those approaches at home, if you're aware of the sorts of things that we're doing in school, I think if we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, as it were, we're all moving in the right direction then. So I would say the key things at the moment is for you just to become aware of what the learning behaviours are that your child's class teacher is focusing on, maybe just trying to back that up at home, and just to find out a little bit more about the behaviours and how they're being supported in class at the moment. Now, if you would like to go into any of the Key Stage 2 classrooms this afternoon for the next half an hour, in my class the children are going to be doing a noticing activity where they've got to look at, in detail at some pictures to work out a storyboard. But there'll only be one very small square of a picture in the middle of the table, so it requires the children having to leave their seats, crowd over and all have a look at it, and the whole collaboration will come into that as well, I suppose. But it's really getting them to look at the fine details on the picture. Mr. Burford will be in the hall, and he's going to be doing some dance, but it requires the revising and imitation, I think he said. He's going to get the children to... The learning behaviour of imitation is about children being able to recognise what's good, copy what's good, and then build on it. So that's the sort of thing they're going to be doing in the hall. Mr. Jackson is going to be using the whole idea of asking questions, the children asking questions of each other to move their learning on in a science activity that's happening this afternoon, if you want to have a look at that. And I think Mr. Hawker is doing science as well, but his focus will be on collaboration and the children collaborating. And it's not, just for you to know that there is actually a whole a whole host of skills behind collaboration. There's a real breakdown that I should have brought my little wheel along, actually, that my children use. There are lots of little strands to collaboration. It's not just get on with other people. It's really broken down into quite finer points. It's collaboration might be being able to step back and let others take the lead. And that's quite hard for some children who are quite naturally wanting to be a leader and take over an activity, but they've got to also learn there's got to be situations when you're working with other people that sometimes you might really want to do something in that group, but you've got to step back and let somebody else do that. At times you've got to come to some sort of agreement without falling out and having all sorts of other issues. So it's being quite mature in the approach. So with every learning behaviour, there is actually a lot behind it, and there's a real breakdown on how we actually teach children those skills. And that they've been referred to as lifelong skills this afternoon, and they really are. It's really about the children becoming ready for life learners.